The Cleveland torso murderer, also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, was an unidentified serial killer who was active in Cleveland, Ohio, United States, in the 1930s. The killings were characterized by the dismemberment of 12 known victims and the disposal of their remains in the impoverished neighborhood of Kingsbury Run. Most victims came from an area east of Kingsbury Run called the Roaring Third, known for its bars, gambling dens and brothels. Another name for this area was Hobo Jungle, as it was home to many vagrants. Despite an investigation of the murders, which at one time was led by famed lawman Eliot Ness, then Cleveland's public safety director, the murderer was never apprehended. Murders. The official number of murders attributed to the Cleveland torso murderer is 12, although recent research has shown there could have been as many as 20. The 12 known victims were killed between 1935 and 1938. Some investigators, including lead Cleveland detective Peter Murillo, believe that there may have been 13 or more victims in the Cleveland, Youngstown, and Pittsburgh areas between the 1920s and 1950s. Two strong candidates for addition to the initial list of those killed are the unknown victim nicknamed the Lady of the Lake, found on September 5, 1934, and Robert Robertson, found on July 22, 1950. The victims of the torso murderer were usually drifters whose identities were never determined, although there were a few exceptions. Victims numbers 2, 3, and 8 were identified as Edward Andrassy, Florence Polillo, and possibly Rose Wallace, respectively. The victims appeared to be lower-class individuals, easy prey in Depression-era Cleveland. Many were known as working poor, who had nowhere else to live but the ramshackle Depression-era shantytowns or Hoovervilles in the area known as the Cleveland Flats. The torso murderer always beheaded and often dismembered their victims, occasionally severing the victim's torso in half or severing their appendages. In many cases the cause of death was the decapitation or dismemberment itself. Most of the male victims were castrated. Some victims showed evidence of chemical treatment being applied to their bodies. Many of the victims were found after a considerable period of time following their deaths, occasionally in excess of a year. In an era when forensic science was largely in its infancy, these factors further complicated identification, especially since the heads were often undiscovered during the time of the official murders. Eliot Ness held the position of Public Safety Director of Cleveland, a position with authority over the police department and ancillary services, including the fire department. While Ness had little to do with the investigation, his posthumous reputation as leader of the Untouchables has made him an irresistible character in modern, torso murder lore. Ness did contribute to the arrest and interrogation of one of the prime suspects, Dr. Francis E. Sweeney. In addition, he personally conducted raids into hobo shanties and eventually burned down Kingsbury Run, from which the killer took his or her victims. At one point in time, the killer taunted Ness by placing the remains of 2 victims in full view of his office in City Hall. Victims. Most researchers consider there to be 12 victims. New evidence suggests a woman dubbed the Lady of the Lake could be included. Only 2 victims were positively identified. The other 10 were 6 John Does and 4 Jane Does. Edward Andrassy was buried in St. Mary Cemetery, Cleveland, Ohio. Florence Polillo was buried in Pennsylvania. 5 of the John Jane Does, Lady of the Lake, and victims John Doe number 1, John Doe number 2, John Doe number 4, Jane Doe number 1 were buried in Potter's Field section of Highland Park Cemetery, Highland Park, Cuyahoga County, Ohio. Possible victims. Several non-canonical victims are commonly discussed in connection with the torso murderer. The first was nicknamed the Lady of the Lake and was found near Euclid Beach on the Lake Erie shore on September 5, 1934, at virtually the same spot as canonical victim number 7. Some researchers of the torso murderer's victims count the Lady of the Lake as victim number 1 or victim 0. The headless body of an unidentified male was found in a boxcar in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. On July 1, 1936, 3 headless victims were found in boxcars near McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania. On May 3, 1940, all bore similar injuries to those inflicted by the Cleveland killer. Dismembered bodies were also found in the swamps near Newcastle between the years 1921 and 1934 and between 1939 and 1942. In September 1940, an article in the Newcastle News refers to the killer as the murder swamp killer. The almost identical similarities between the victims in Newcastle to those in Cleveland, Ohio, coupled with the similarities between Newcastle's murder swamp and Cleveland's Kingsbury Run, both of which were directly connected by a Baltimore and Ohio Railroad line, were enough to convince Cleveland detective Peter Murillo that the Newcastle murders were the work of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. Murillo was convinced the connection was the railroad that ran twice a day between the two cities. He often rode the rails undercover looking for clues to the killer's identity. On July 22, 1950, the body of 41-year-old Robert Robertson was found at a business at 2138 Davenport Avenue in Cleveland. Police believe he had been dead 6 to 8 weeks and appeared to have been intentionally decapitated. His death appeared to fit the profile of other victims. He was estranged from his family, had an arrest record and a drinking problem, and was on the fringes of society. Despite widespread newspaper coverage linking the murder to the crimes in the 1930s, detectives investigating Robertson's death treated it as an isolated crime. In 1939, the torso killer claimed to have killed a victim in Los Angeles, California. An investigation uncovered animal bones. Suspects on August 24, 1939, a Cleveland resident named Frank Dalzell, 52, was arrested as a suspect in Florence Palillo's murder. He later died in suspicious circumstances in the Cuyahoga County Jail. Most investigators consider the last canonical murder to have been in 1938. One suspected individual was Dr. Francis E. Sweeney. Born May 5, 1894, Sweeney was a veteran of World War I who was part of a medical unit that conducted amputations in the field. Sweeney was later personally interviewed by Eliot Ness, who oversaw the official investigation into the killings in his capacity as Cleveland's safety director. During this interrogation, Sweeney is said to have failed to pass 2 very early polygraph machine tests. Both tests were administered by polygraph expert Leonard Keeler, who told Ness he had his man. Ness apparently felt there was little chance of obtaining a successful prosecution of the doctor, especially as he was the first cousin of one of Ness's political opponents, Congressman Martin L. Sweeney, who had hounded Ness publicly about his failure to catch the killer. After Sweeney committed himself, there were no more leads or connections that police could assign to him as a possible suspect. From his hospital confinement, Sweeney sent threatening postcards and harassed Ness and his family into the 1950s. Sweeney died in a veterans hospital in Dayton on July 9, 1964. In 1997, another theory postulated that there may have been no single butcher of Kingsbury Run because the murders could have been committed by different people. This was based on the assumption that the autopsy results were inconclusive. First, Cuyahoga County Coroner Arthur J. Pierce may have been inconsistent in his analysis as to whether the cuts on the bodies were expert or slapdash. Second, his successor, Samuel Gerber, who began to enjoy press attention from his involvement in such cases as the Sam Shepard murder trial, garnered a reputation for sensational theories. Therefore, the only thing known for certain was that all the murder victims were dismembered. In popular culture, the 1998-1999 comic book series Torso by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Andreyko was based on the killings. The 2018 film The Kingsbury Run was based on the murders. The murders and the hunt for the perpetrators were covered in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Eliot Ness and the Mad Butcher, Hunting America's Deadliest Unidentified Serial Killer at the Dawn of Modern Criminology, by Max Allan Collins and A. Brad Schwartz, was published August 4, 2020. See also Black Dahlia, a Los Angeles murder case that some investigators have suggested may have been committed by the same killer, or May, detective who worked on the case Thames Torso Murders, another series of murders in which the torsos of victims were left behind. General list of fugitives from justice who disappeared. List of serial killers in the United States. References. Citations. Bibliography. Badal, James Jesson, 2001. In the Wake of the Butcher. Cleveland's Torso Murders. Kent, Ohio. Kent State University Press. ISBN 9781612772769. Bellamy, John, 1997. The Maniac in the Bushes and More Tales of Cleveland. Woe! True Crimes and Disasters from the Streets of Cleveland. Cleveland, Ohio. Gray and Company. ISBN 9781886228191. Paperback. Black, Lisa, 2010. Trail of Blood. New York, New York. William Morrow. ISBN 9780061989339. Hardback. Brady, Ian, 2001. The Gates of Janus. Serial Killing and Its Analysis. Los Angeles, California. Feral House. ISBN 9780922915736. Hardback. Collins, Max Allen, 1988. Butcher's Dozen. An Eliot Ness novel. Toronto, New York. Bantam Books. ISBN 9780553261516. Paperback. Collins, Max Allen and A. Brad Schwartz. Eliot Ness and the Mad Butcher. Hunting America's Deadliest Unidentified Serial Killer at the Dawn of Modern Criminology. New York. HarperCollins, 2020. ISBN 9781094168951. Cook, John, 1993. Torso. London. Headline Book Publishing. ISBN 9780747241935. Paperback. Nicol, Stephen, 1989. Torso. The Story of Eliot Ness and the Search for a Psychopathic Killer. Winston-Salem, North Carolina. John F. Blair Publishers. ISBN 9780895872463. Paperback, 2nd edition 2002. Rasmussen, William, 2005. Corroborating Evidence 2. The Cleveland Torso Murders, The Black Dahlia Murder, The Zodiac Killer, The Phantom Killer of Texarkana. Santa Fe, New Mexico. Sunstone Press. ISBN 9780865345362. Paperback. Ritt, William, 1990. The Headhunter of Kingsbury Run. London. Guild Publishing. ISBN 1-854-800-302. Mark Wade Stone, Director, 2004. The 14th Victim. Eliot Ness and Torso Murders, Media Notes. David A. Brudowski, Director of Photography. Marie Studniars Rudolph, Associate Producer. Carl Michel, Music. Cleveland, Ohio. Storytellers Media Group. ISBN 0974957534. Wilson, Colin, 1992. Murder in the 1930s. New York. Carroll and Groff. ISBN 9780881848557. Paperback. Martinelli, Patricia A. 2011. True Crime, Ohio. The state's most notorious criminal cases. Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Stackpole Books. ISBN 9780811706506. Notes *. The victim, found at Morgan Run, near 55th Street, Cleveland, was estimated to be 20 to 23 years old, light complexion, reddish-brown hair, chestnut-colored eyes, stood 5 foot 10 inches or 11 inch tall, slender build, weighed 165 pounds. He had 6 unusual tattoos on his body, a bird and band and the names, Helen and Paul, on the inner side of his left forearm, a heart and anchor in red and blue on the outer side of his right forearm, a flag and the initials, WCG, on the inner side of his right forearm, a butterfly on his left shoulder, the head of the comic character, Jigs, on his left ankle, and an image of Cupid on his right ankle. His undershorts bore a laundry mark indicating the owner's initials were JD. Despite Morgan death mask inspections by thousands of Cleveland citizens in the summer of 1936 at the Great Lakes Exposition, the victim, known as the tattooed man, was never identified. ***. The victim was believed to be a 40-year-old man. Clothing was muddied and piled up next to the head, 10 feet from the nude body, in an isolated east side woodland section. There were bloodstains on the coat and blue polo shirt, part of the clothing found with the head. Coroner A.J. Pierce said that the preliminary investigation disclosed that there was some doubt that the man was murdered. Not a single clue was found with the body other than the clothing. ****. Victim was possibly Rose Wallace. Dental work was considered a close match by police and her son, who said he was certain that the victim was his mother. Exact identification could not be achieved because the dentist who carried out the work had died years before. Doubts remained because the body was estimated to have been dead for a year, whereas Wallace had only been missing for 10 months. External links: Cleveland Torso Murders, Google Map of the Torso Murders, the Kingsbury Run Murders, Torso Killer at Curlie.